areas of Auckland too.
Shirley's just hit the record button, so hopefully everyone's okay with the session being recorded this morning. Just wait a couple more minutes just for some last folk to hop into the waiting room. Okay, I think we're good to go. Pete and Gary, are you good to go?
Yep, all good, Liz.
Okay, great, thank you. Good morning again, everyone. Thank you for coming along to our session this morning around how ACC can support your business. This is the first webinar that we've done with ACC, and we're pretty excited about this. ACC have an incredible amount of resources, and there's an awful lot, so we're hoping that we can share more over 2022, as it nearly is, around how ACC can support your business. So this is the first one that we've done, so I know you'll be kind to Peter and Gary, who are, or mainly Peter, who's talking with you this morning. And just a couple of minutes on ShopCare, looking at the names of the participants today. I know most of the names, there's a couple of you I don't know. So ShopCare is a health and safety sector group that covers retail, supply chain, transport, and manufacturing. And we provide, we connect people to people and people to solutions around health and safety, covering those sectors. So I'd like to introduce Peter Oxley, who's going to be presenting to you today, and Gary Stevens, both from ACC, who's running the tech behind the scenes. So thank you so much, Peter and Gary, for your time this morning and for putting together this presentation. We've got, I think, a couple of poll questions that will run near the end, so we'd really appreciate you hanging on and answering the poll questions. It helps us make sure that we're delivering value around the webinars and sessions that we run. I'm actually multitasking today, so I'm on a full day, a full morning rather, session with PwC as we're working towards our next 5-year plan. So I'm going to duck out in a minute and leave you in the capable hands of Shirley. So Shirley's a key member of our ShopCare team, and she'll be just supporting Peter and Gary, and we're closing out the session at the end. So thanks again, and I'll hand over to Peter.
Thanks, Liz. Thanks for the introduction. Morning all. As Liz outlined, I'm Pete Oxley. I'm a team manager in Tamaki Makaurau, Auckland, and I've had the privilege of working for ACC over the last 10 to 15 years. And yeah, looking forward to the session this morning with yourselves. Now, I do see a few familiar names, so hi to people who I do recognise the names. Just a bit of background. Look, I've been working for ACC for a few years now, predominantly in customer frontline roles. Started off in case management, have worked a lot in injury prevention, account management with our business customers, and more recently team management roles in our claims teams and team manager at the moment in our business customer space. Gary will be helping me in the background, doing the tech, so hopefully it goes smoothly, and we've got a few videos for this morning. So just the outline for this morning, we'll go over a ACC overview, just very high level, a few stats and figures. We'll touch on case management, the past, the present, and the future. We'll touch on return to work, recovery at work, and introduce you to some of our guidelines we've recently developed recently. Experience rating, ER, we'll go very high level on ER. It can get quite technical, but I will attempt to communicate some of the key ER issues for you. Touch on our digital platform, MyACC for Business, which is absolutely critical going forward with ACC. And if you're not on MyACC for Business, I strongly encourage you all to get onto it. And we'll touch on some resources at the end. Look, I encourage you throughout the session, there's a chat function. I encourage you just to, if you want to ask questions in that, I will have a wee exercise later on around using the chat function, so please feel free to use it. We will have a questions and answers if required at the end as well, but yeah, please use the chat function. As Gary is just getting the video together, it's around a couple minutes, and then I'll talk to some of the key points after the video. So yeah, thanks Gary, all yours.
Since 1974, ACC has been helping New Zealanders get the best out of life. We're here for children, beneficiaries, and students. For people who are working, unemployed, or retired. We're here for everyone who lives in New Zealand, and for people visiting from overseas. If you're injured in an accident in New Zealand, whether it's relatively minor or something more serious, we're here to provide care and support so you can get back to everyday life. Every year, we accept around 2 million claims. Many of the New Zealanders we help might not even realise that ACC is involved in their care. That's because 94% of the people we help simply visit their doctor, a hospital, or a physiotherapist for treatment, and don't realise that we're working in the background to help pay for the support they need. We don't just help people recover from injuries, we also help to prevent them, supporting programs that keep you safe on the roads, at home or at work, on the sports field, and in the water. We also work to prevent sexual violence by helping to educate teens about healthy relationships. And because it's important that you get help as soon as possible in an accident, we also help to fund emergency services like ambulances and rescue helicopters. The level of help we can provide people with is set by legislation. We can accept claims for injuries resulting from accidents, but we can't usually accept claims that are the result of illness. Sometimes it can be hard to tell if an injury has been caused by an accident, illness, or general wear and tear. In this situation, we might need to get expert medical opinions or assessments before we can make a decision. But we do accept over 97% of the claims we receive. Regarded worldwide as a unique scheme, ACC helps every single New Zealander live life to the fullest, no matter what comes their way.
Yeah, thanks, Gary. So look, as the video has outlined, we receive 2 million claims per year. I think it's just over 2 million claims per year. So look, we're a big organisation. Most of our claims, people don't even realise that ACC is in the background. Most of the people just go to their GP, will go to the physio, and just get a consultation or a couple of treatment sessions and don't even realise ACC is there. So look, we're massive across the board. The screen you see in front of you is just to again reinforce the critical role we have in managing public funds. As you can see from the top half of the picture there, money comes from various areas, and I'll touch on them very shortly as well. But in the work account, the employer's account, look, we almost collect $1 billion worth of levy per annum. It's a big source with lots of expenditure across the board. You'll see there weekly comp and vocational rehab, approximately $2 billion is spent in that area. The issue that we have at ACC is the increasing of costs, and is expected to increase around 5% over the next 3 years. One, due to the volume of injuries and claims that we are receiving, and secondly, the rehab and treatment costs, such as increasing costs with doctors, specialists, and so on. So because of that, we are expecting a increase around about 5% over the next 3 years. And if you were involved in levy consultation, which is just finalised, we discussed that in quite a lot of detail, and I will touch on proposed rates very, very shortly. Got the next slide there, Gary. Again, this is just to show you the scale of ACC in terms of costs. For the 2020 calendar year, the cost of active claims hit over $4 billion. Half of it was in our home and community. And you may have seen on TV over the last few weeks and months, our campaigns have a hymn focusing on injury prevention. So look, home and community is absolutely huge. The most typical injury we see is outside of work, slip, trips and falls. You can see there falls is almost $1 billion on its own. So it's a big area. In the work on the bottom right hand side, you'll see the big three: agriculture, manufacturing and construction are our biggest industries in terms of costs. And in sport and recreation, you will notice there rugby union, $75 million for the 2020 calendar year. Now there's lots of initiatives with our rugby union colleagues. Probably most people are aware of Rugby Smart and similar type of programs with our other sporting affiliations as well. In the road, unfortunately, lots of our high-speed accidents causes a lot of our serious injuries. And it's reflected in that driving and passenger bubble on the bottom left-hand side. Thanks, Gary. So you just briefly around the funding. There's 5 key funding accounts. The work account on the top left-hand corner, the work account pays for all of our work injuries, and we invoice the employer or invoice the self-employed. It's a risk-based account. So if you work in a more risky industry, we will charge you more than a lower risk industry. So this is the first opportunity I can use the chat today. So here's a question for you. What do you think, and use the chat function on the right hand side, what do you think is the most riskiest industry that ACC has? And for bonus points today, what do you think the amount that we charge per $100 of wage bill? And it's less than $10. So what do you think is the most riskiest industry in the work account? And what do you think we charge that industry? If you want to use the chat function on the right hand side, I want to see if, so we've got adventure tourism. Any other takers other than adventure tourism? We've got forestry, yep, forestry. Any other goers, any other takers this morning? We've got construction from Shirley. Got agriculture, Jeanette. Morning, Jeanette, good to see you. Vehicles and roads. So the highest risk industry that we have is professional sports. So our professional rugby league, and our jockeys who keep falling off our horses. So we charge them, I think it's around $6.20, $6.30 for every $100 of wage bill. Right down the other end of the spectrum, the lower risk industries, accounting services, legal services, and computer programmers, and we charge them around about 4 cents for every $100 of wage bill. So it's a risk-based account. Each industry will have a rate, and as yourself as an employer, you will be invoiced. So if you don't know what industry or LRG you belong to, I strongly encourage you to talk to the people who receive the invoices. Or if you do have a solution partner, an ACC solution partner, which some of you bigger employers will have, I'm sure you're in discussions with them quite a lot. So that's the work account. The earners account. So this pays for all of our earners, so people who are at work, pays for all their non-work accidents. And for employees, we collect that through the PAYE system. For self-employed, we invoice. And I'll touch on just the proposed rates in the earners account very, very shortly. In the motor vehicle account, so of course this covers our accidents that happen in motor vehicles. There's 2 ways we collect this. One is through vehicle registration. The other way is through when you fill up your vehicle at the petrol pump. And yes, you'll be receiving the copy of the recording Ange at the end through ShopCare. What's the rate for manufacturing? Look, I won't go into details of every single classification unit. I'm happy to share the document at the end, which will show it. But it's quite important if you're in the health and safety field to give a good understanding of, one, what industry you are in, and secondly, what do we charge, and ultimately, what is your invoice for your particular for your companies. If we just jump onto the next slide there, Gary, into proposed levy rates, because I just mentioned before, levy consultation has just finalised. We're just waiting for Cabinet to finalise the final rates for the next 3 years, because we do consultation for every 3 years now. So for the work account, so that's the fund for our work-related injuries, the current average is 67 cents per $100. So we've got professional sports at the top end at $6.40, $6.30, and right at the lower end we have our accountants and legal beagles at 4 cents. So it's proposed for next year. I stress it is only proposed. It's proposed the average levy is 63 cents. So in other words, going down. For the year after that, 65 cents, and then in 3 years' time, it's 67 back to where it is today. So on average, a decrease for the next 2 years, and then for the 24-25 years, it is where it is currently at 67 cents. So look, I really encourage you to, when they are confirmed, to look at the rates for your particular company, because people in your finance team will want to budget, and it is very, very important. So again, if you have a solutions partner, they'll probably will communicate that to you, or generally on our ACC website, that information will be there too. So the earners account, so just to remind everybody, this is to pay for non-work accidents. The current levy is $1.21 for every $100 that we all earn. It is proposed to increase over the next 3 years to $1.27 to $1.39. Again, I stress it is proposed at the moment. So that will affect the take-home pay earners will receive going forward. When it does get confirmed, these rates will come into effect from 1 April 2022, 23, and then 24. The last one, the motor vehicle account, of course, to pay for a motor vehicle accident. The current average across the vehicle fleet's around about $114 per vehicle, but of course it's different for a motor car to a truck, so it is an average levy. Again, its proposal was to increase over the next 3 years up to almost $140. Again, I need to stress that's for the average vehicle. If it's a truck, of course, it'll be more compared to a small passenger vehicle. What we cover, what we do and what we don't. So what we do cover, look, the fundamentals of the scheme, and predominantly most of our claims are physical injury caused by an accident. There has to be a clear link between accident and physical injury for cover. Of course, a practitioner or a treatment provider can lodge the claim on behalf of the injured person. It doesn't have to be a GP. It can be a physio or acupuncturist to lodge the claim for cover. So that's the fundamentals, physical injury caused by accident. We also cover work-related gradual process, disease or infection. And the most obvious one that we have is noise-induced hearing loss. So that's an example of work-related gradual process. For lodgement for that, again, the injured person would need to talk to their general practitioner to lodge that through to ACC. We also have treatment injuries, and we also cover mental injury caused by 3 different areas: sexual abuse or sexual assault, a sudden traumatic event in the workplace, and that's more a serious incident. So for example, if I was a bus driver and I witnessed a horrific car accident where I witnessed someone dying, that we potentially could be covered for mental injury. The last one is mental injury caused by a physical injury. So for example, I break my leg, I am physically injured because that's caused by an accident. I'm off work for an extended period of time, and then I'm diagnosed for having depression or anxiety. Now that has to be diagnosed by a clinical psychologist or psychiatrist, and there's a robust process around that. What we don't cover, on the next slide, we don't cover non-work gradual process injuries. We don't cover the next one there. We don't cover the aging process. We don't cover illness. We don't cover stress on its own. Now, those are one of the questions that we received from ShopCare members beforehand. So one of the questions was, how does AC determine work-related stress, and how do they determine cover? The answer is we don't actually cover stress on its own. Like with the previous slide, we only cover mental injuries if it's a result of sexual abuse, where there's an existing physical injury already in play, or a traumatic event in the workplace, such as witnessing a very horrific accident. We also don't cover injury to teeth arising from their natural use. We will cover if you on a Friday night get accidentally hit by someone, a patron in a bar. We will cover that, but teeth arising from the natural use, no, we don't. And we don't cover hernias caused by coughing or sneezing. Now, there was a question also beforehand regarding COVID-19 around covering and not cover. So look, very generally, I will talk to this. Now, cover for the actual virus, the COVID-19 virus, can be considered through the work-related gradual process, disease or infection, and that's lodged just via the normal process, which is through a GP. In relation to any injuries because of the vaccine itself, that would be considered under the treatment injury process. Now, if there's been ordinary consequence of the vaccine, such as fatigue or flu-like symptoms, that's more than likely not to be covered under the scheme. But not ordinary consequences, such as cellulitis or septic arthritis or anaphylactic shocks or something similar, then yes, more than likely that will be covered. There's a lot of information now on our website to that around COVID-19, so I will direct the audience to that afterwards. So to the answer to the question to COVID-19, yes, we will consider covering depending on what the situation is around that. And thanks, James, for sharing the levy rates on the chat. Case management to client recovery. So we're going to have a quick 1-minute video, and then we'll just talk to that soon after. So thanks, Gary. Hopefully that video will come into play very, very shortly. Then we'll just talk about entitlements and our case management model going forward. Thanks, Gary.
No matter who you are, if you're injured in an accident in New Zealand, ACC is here to provide care and support so you can get back to everyday life. Every injury comes with its own unique set of circumstances, and everyone who gets injured is different, with their own needs and priorities, which means we need to tailor our support to each individual who needs our help. If your injury is minor, we fund support like physiotherapy, crutches, or visits to your doctor, depending on your injury. And if you need to take time off work as a result of your injury, you could be eligible to have up to 80% of your income paid, so you and your whānau are looked after. We'll help with your rehabilitation needs too, until you're able to head back to work. This might include counselling. Of course, some injuries can be life-changing. If the worst should happen, we're here for you then too. You could be eligible for in-home care or help with modifications to your home or car. We'll work with you to find the best solution and put that plan into action. And we'll provide financial support along the way. The legislation that we work within allows us to cover accidents, but we usually can't cover claims relating to illness or general wear and tear. No matter what kind of accident you've been affected by, we're here to help you find the best way forward.
Cool, thanks, Gary. So look, just a high-level entitlement. Look, the most obvious one for people is weekly compensation. And most people attending today, it's 80% of your pre-accident earnings is what the injured person will be eligible for. Of course, a medical certificate is critical, and for work accidents, the first 7 days is the employer's responsibility to pay that compensation. For non-work, the first 7 days, essentially it's whatever the contract is with your employee. ACC does not pay in any situation in the first 7 days. We pay from day 8 onwards. So that's weekly compensation. I'll give a bit more detail to that. And I encourage you, if need be, to look at our links after the presentation. In terms of treatment, look, we've mentioned physiotherapy, GP, surgery. So we get surgical requests from specialists, and we have the responsibility to assess their surgical requests, and we do approve a vast majority of our surgical requests through to ACC. as the video just outlines, social rehabilitation. So this is such as home help, attendant care, personal care, child care. Well, I do need to stress here that it is needs assessed. So right at the bottom end of the spectrum, it could be an elderly person falling over who might just need a couple hours of home help per week. Or it could be right up at the other end of the spectrum, someone who unfortunately is very seriously injured, maybe a head injury or a spinal injury, and may require home or vehicle modifications. So that's the other end of the spectrum, or 24-hour personal care. So everything else in between, of course, but it is needs assessed. Not everybody requires the home help or attendant care or personal care, because the vast majority of our claims, people recover just with some physios or just some simple GP advice to move on. Last but not least, vocational rehabilitation, in particular the Stay at Work program, which I will touch on later on in the next few slides. Just in terms of our case management model, you may be aware that we've had some big changes over the last couple of years. Our traditional case management model of face-to-face, predominantly in our branch network across New Zealand, still occurs, and I'll touch on it soon, but it has been scaled back. So the face-to-face, where everybody had a case manager, quite simply, it was resource heavy. We don't have the funds to support that with our increase of claims costs. Also, a significant factor in our change in our case management system was our systems and our processes. They were very, very outdated. So we've introduced a lot of new systems in the digital environment to make things much more smoothly and quickly. So the case management model itself essentially has been around since our introduction back in 1974. So it's what, 45, 50 years ago almost. And it essentially wasn't fit for present day New Zealand. So we moved to a new model approximately 18 months to 2 years ago. Sorry, it's a little bit wordy on the screen. So I'll just explain the 4 different streamings. Now, this is in relation to someone who has been assessed, who is unable to return to their independence or return to work. Like I said, most people don't need ACC assistance or a case owner. They see their physio, they see their GP, and that's it. And that's probably about 90 to 95% of our claims sit in that, and that doesn't need any ACC involvement. But that 5 to 10%, they might need a little bit of ACC assistance. So starting on the right-hand side, on our partnered recovery, these are for our clients who are really seriously injured. So these are our head injuries and our spinal injuries predominantly. So it is very, very much a one-on-one support. It's very, very much still in our local branch. So there's still a very, very close connection between our recovery partners and the very seriously injured client. And I really don't wish that any of your employees fall into the partnered recovery stream, because they will be very, very seriously injured. But we do have, unfortunately, a lot of New Zealanders each year have head injuries and spinal injuries, and it's our responsibility to manage their rehabilitation and their treatment. So that's partnered recovery. The next one to the left is supported recovery and our recovery coordinators. Now, this is still a one-on-one service at our local branch, and it's probably as close as the traditional case management model. It's more for our more complex injuries, not of course spinal or head injuries, but there's complexity in that person's claim or life which requires that one-on-one support at the local branch. So that's recovery coordinators in the supported recovery stream. Now, the biggest change for us all and for you as employers is the next 2 streams. So the first one is assisted recovery and our recovery assistance. Now, this is not a one-on-one type service. It's a team of recovery assistants, and their work is task-based. So they don't have a portfolio of injured people. It's all task-based. So every time they go onto a different task, it's a different injury or a different inquiry from a client or an employer or a provider. And this is a significant change for ACC. and it has taken some time to embed, and we are going through a recruitment at the moment to assist us with some of our task inquiries. But recovery assistants are absolutely critical and really, really important, and probably the ACC people that as an employers or injured employees will work with the most going forward. There's still a requirement for our recovery assistants to be proactive. There's still a requirement to call what we call our welcome conversation, to call our injured employees or injured clients, and also to call the employer to set the scene, to set the rehab, and to set the plan going forward. There's also regular check-ins. So there's still an expectation for our recovery assistants to call our injured clients and the employers to give regular updates at the same time. So recovery assistants are more than likely the people that you will deal with the most often. On the left-hand side is what we call enabled recovery, and this is self-managing. Now, there is no ACC proactivity with the enabled stream. However, there is nothing stopping an injured client or an employer call us in relation to their injury or their injury claim. But essentially, this is self-managing. It will be driven essentially by the employee, the employer, and the provider working together. And ACC is in the background if required. I will give out further contact numbers at the end, but a very important number for employees and for employers is 0800 101 996. That's the phone number to our contact centre, and that's our entry in for providers, employers, and employees. And that's our contact centre. We'll pick up your calls, and if required, if it's a complex query, we'll escalate through to these relevant teams in the background. So that is our current way of working as we presently are at ACC. I just want to touch on very, very briefly the recovery in our way going forward, because digital technology in the insurance world and the banking world, and ACC is no different, is becoming much more prevalent. I mean, hopefully you're aware of our two key digital platforms at ACC. The first one is MyACC for injured clients. It's been around now for probably a couple of years, and the enhancements are getting better and better all the time. The injured client will be invited via a email or text if they fall into any of those streams I showed before: enabled, assisted, supported, and partnered. If they just go to their GP or physio and that's it, then they won't get an invitation to MyACC. But anyone who essentially has some time off work will be invited at cover time to register onto MyACC. The MyACC platform has got some really cool functions. The injured client can update their personal information. They can update details about the accident and diagnosis. They can view the timeline. They can provide authority to ACC to collect medical records and other information, because I need to stress that privacy is extremely, extremely important at ACC. And disclosure of information, of course, we cannot disclose information to any third party without consent. And also a potential employee can request their pre-employment check for any potential employer. So it's got lots of cool functions in there too. The other important function for MyACC, and we're really encouraging this, is the importance of applying for weekly compensation through the MyACC platform. So injured clients don't have to phone or email. They can use digital platforms to request weekly comp. They can also view and upload medical certificates, because ACC needs to have medical certificates to pay any form of weekly compensation. They can also update or upload their bank account details, their tax code, and their IRD number. We need those for weekly compensation purposes, because we need to liaise with IRD to gather their financial information so we can correctly assess their levels of weekly compensation. Last but not least, there's other functions of MyACC around the chat bot, and there's live support at the same time. So there is some really good information there. The other really important digital platform for ACC is for employers, which is called MyACC for Business. Now, this has been enhanced over the last 18 months to 2 years. So currently in the platform up on the screen there in front of you at the moment, you can update your contact and business details. You can get invoices present and past. You can download your invoices. You can make payments arrangements online, and you can view your work-related employee claims and costs. Really important around the work-related employee claims is there's some other significant enhancements just around the corner. And I've been lucky enough this year to work with the MyACC for Business team around some enhancements in this space. Now, hopefully early next year, it's probably going to be around April, May. We hope the enhancements will include such things as your employees' medical certificate, the durations of when they are unfit for work, so from and to, including their status, i.e. fit for selected work, and what work functions they can or can't do. The other really important thing is on that is that we can't disclose who the provider is. There will still be a requirement for you, if you want the full information, to go to your employee to get the medical certificate. We've been working with privacy very closely with this, but we're confident that we fulfill all the privacy requirements. We have talked with key stakeholders around this, but we are very confident from probably April, May next year, there's going to be some important work-related medical certification details that will help you with an employer start those conversations as early as you possibly can. Because around return to work and recovery work, the most important thing is having those early conversations and early communications as soon as possible. So we're really hopeful those functions, those enhancements will be around April, May next year. Some other enhancements that we're looking at down the track is such as the weekly comp days duration for ER purposes, the date of first incapacity date, the DOFI date. Now, if anyone comes from a pay background, the first week, the DOFI date is absolutely imperative. So we're hopeful that we can share that information. We used to share it on the old ACC3 form, but we no longer go to payrolls anymore because we've got a direct link with IRD around that. We're also looking at seeing how we can actually, the claim notification letter itself, how can we digitally have enhancements so that letter is also uploaded into MyACC as quickly as live time as you possibly can do so. So there's a lot of work in the background in our digital world between our claims systems and our MyACC for Business system to get those links working. But we're pretty confident by April we'll have the first 2 or 3 enhancements in play for everybody. And yes, Jeanette, it is great news, and I know some of our employers are waiting for the functionality to improve in the space. Return to work, recovery work, just some key guidelines, and I've already sort of touched on it, and I might be preaching to the converted today, but it's absolutely imperative that we get employees, employers, and providers talking together and that communication going between all 3. ACC, of course, is in the background, and we always will be part of the claim. But our experience has shown us if we can get the employee and the employer to talk early, and it sounds so simple, but we see it happens. It just does not happen in lots of our cases. If we can get that employee and an employer to speak as early as possible in conjunction with the provider, and of course the medical certificate is absolutely critical in those discussions, and hopefully the enhancements will help you with those discussions. We're really pressing the importance of that. The guidelines you see in front of you, we've developed over the last few months, and I believe Shirley will share with these guidelines with you afterwards. There's around a 6 to 7 key document in here. The whole idea is to try and empower employers with those better conversations. Again, there's some really good flow diagrams around the claims process. and even before the cover and claims process, just around encouraging employees to report the accident to you as the employer. Also around starting the conversation. Some really good sort of information, probably for more line managers, to encourage them those discussions, because ultimately that return to work in most organisations will sit with the line manager, with a health and safety practitioner or a health and safety person in the background. So this 6 to 7 page document is available. It also gives us some really good information around creating a recovery at work plan. And now it doesn't have to be fancy or anything like that, but it's just some ideas for employers to consider in that process around recovery at work. The other key element in the guidelines is around medical certification, and we do really encourage you to get consents from your employees. Again, it's a decision that you need to make by a case-by-case basis, but with those consents, it does open up the door for those discussions to be much more freely between the provider and you and an employee, and also if ACC is required to be in those conversations too. We really stress the importance of sharing alternate duties or suitable duties with the practitioner. Now, if the practitioner has more balanced view of what's going on in the workplace, i.e. suitable duties, they have more information for them to make a more informed decision. So we really do encourage you as employers to have those discussions early on with your employees, but also at the same time, any information you can share with the employee and or the provider around those alternate or suitable duties will really help with those balanced medical certificates going forward. So we have a few tips and hints in the guidelines around that as well at the same time. We did receive 2 or 3 questions from probably people in this audience beforehand, just in and around return to work and recovery work. So I've just got a few questions I'll just go over now. The first question we received is around, I'm aware ACC cannot assist us with employment issues. That's correct. But is there any assistance that ACC can offer for longer tail claims to assist us plan manning more than 3 months? The answer is yes. Now, we are required to have ACC, to have a rehab plan in place, or we call them recovery plans now. So there should be a recovery plan in place for more complex claims, especially for people who have been off claim for 3 months or more. There is a legislative requirement for ACC to have a recovery plan or rehab plan from at the 13-week mark on, around about 3 months. So the answer is yes, we do have rehab plans, and we really encourage our case owners or recovery assistants to involve the employers in those plans for obvious reasons. So I really encourage you as an employers to be involved, to work with your employees, and in these instances, you'll need to work with ACC. So we need to work together in partnership for those recovery plans, especially for those more complex injuries. The other assistance that we can offer are our stay at work programs, or SAW, SAW. Now, SAWS is a contracted service that ACC has contracted out to a group of contractor providers. It tends to be occupational therapists or physiotherapists that will be contracted to go into your place of work to meet you as the employer and also the employee to discuss the injury, discuss the diagnosis, discuss the prognosis, but more importantly, and together, devise a return to work plan for that injured employee. It's usually used for more complex injuries, or if someone's off work for a long period of time, or there's lots of red flags such as psychosocial factors, or just needs some professional assistance because there's some other conflict going on potentially between employer and employee and the provider. So we don't refer every single time for a SAW program, but it's a very, very, very good tool or assessment to have to facilitate those return to work plans for more complex claims. I will note we can't share the full SAW program to you as the employer because of privacy, but the actual return to work element of it, the return to work plan, the 10-week or 12-week program, yes, we can share with you that because there is no medical information in that. So I do encourage you to consider this as as an option, but for more complex claims, we consider these SOAR programs more to be used for. The other question was around employees advising after months off work. That ACC is no longer covering the claim, and they will need to take sick leave to cover the absence while they await public surgery. When I get a question like that, indicates to me, and it does happen for some of the claims, that we suspend weekly compensation entitlements. So in other words, the ongoing incapacity is not linked to the covered injury, it's linked to degeneration or non-injury factors. So it's really, really important if you have those conversations with your employee or you hear something like that, there's been a decision that's been made by ACC to suspend those persons' entitlements. We can't disclose that decision to you as the employer, but the employee will have that decision. And to get to that decision does take a lot of weeks, if not months, to get to that stage. So I really encourage you to talk to your employees as much as you possibly can. It sounds so simple, but the amount of questions that we have saying from employers coming to us saying, what's going on in my employee's claim? And we turn around and say, have you spoken to your employee? And again, it sounds so easy. And a number of times they say, no, I haven't. We really encourage you to have those discussions first with your employees. And 8 times out of 10, you'll get the answers around these type of questions. Look, we don't like to suspend people's entitlements, but we have a responsibility to manage the funds, to manage the scheme, and the integrity of the scheme too. So I just encourage you to talk to your employees when there's ever an instance of these situations arising. Thanks, Gary. Experience rating. Just touch on this, and again, I won't go into any real detail. It's quite difficult to explain virtually ER, and it's quite hard to explain ER at the best of times. So I would encourage you to link in with your solution partner or link into ACC after this if you want a more in-depth. I do need to stress this is not applicable for accredited employers, of course. This is only applicable for standard employers. So experience rating has roughly been around 10 years at ACC. There's been a few tweaks, and at the latest consultation there's potentially a few changes coming up. But very, very, very simply, because I'm a simple person, the idea of experience rating is to reward good behaviour and therefore a good discount off your levies for an employer, or if you have bad behaviour, in other terms, you keep injuring your employees and those weekly compensation days keep increasing. If you're in that situation, we will penalise you. And it's like, if I take, for example, the motor insurance world for your own car insurance. If you have lots and lots and lots of car accidents and you are at fault, your car insurer is going to increase your premiums or remove your no claims discount. And we are no different. If you are above the industry average for the number of claims or for the weekly compensation days compared to your industry average, you will get a loading in your ER modifier. So in other words, you'll be paying more than your industry peers. But on the flip side, if you're performing better than your industry peers, you will receive a discount, and you can receive up to a 75% discount off your standard levy rate. So there is an incentive around the return to work. The ER is the incentive. Most employers fall in the 15% loading to the 15% discount sort of area. And I encourage you all after today, if you don't know, go and find out what your experience rating modifier is. So up on screen at the moment, now you can look at your levy invoice, your ER info sheet, your quarterly claims reports, and your group ER report. Now, all of them happen to be on MyACC for Business. So if you're not on MyACC for Business, strongly suggest to get on it, have a play around, and you'll see your ER experience rating modifier. Nearly there, team. The last lot of resources and links about to be shown, hopefully up on screen. And again, Shirley will be sharing the presentation to all attendees. So the guidelines we will share as a PDF, but some also really cool conversation cards, essentially, for frontline managers, some really, really basic stuff. But what we found is line managers and team managers don't often have these discussions. So we found from the feedback that they really liked some of these basic cues and hints and tips. So have a look on our website there. It may help some of your line managers and some of your places of organisations. The link there for MyACC for Business. There's a link there around COVID-19, general business queries, our website, our invoice, experience rating, how it works. Now, where you sit in orange traffic light, our solution partners will be able to visit you very, very shortly, face to face. If you're based in Auckland on our red traffic light, we can't go out there at the moment. But with experience rating, I do really encourage you to probably work with your solution partner to have a presentation face to face around that. It does get a little bit more complex than my explanation just before. A little bit about workplace health and safety, and also the very, very last one around levy consultation 2021. Just watch out for the final decisions around levy consult. I'm sure we'll be communicating that to all businesses very, very shortly. The last slide is just reinforcing a few key contact numbers around the generic business queries phone line and email address. That claims queries phone number and the email address I just provided to you. I would really encourage injured employees to use the MyACC platform to escalate, because we're really encouraging that self-management. That BCS email address, look, if you're not quite sure if you've got a solution partner, I just encourage you just use that BCS email address just for the escalation point at the moment, and we can come back to you. But a large number of larger employers will have a solution partner in the background. Last but not least, our website, acc.co.nz. On that note, and we've got 5 minutes to go, I know I answered a few questions during the presentation. I'm happy to answer if there is any questions over the last few minutes, either by chat or by the old traditional verbal, if you want to unmute yourselves. But if just any questions at all. If you have any questions after the presentation, again, look, feel free to use that BCS email address. My good friend Gary Stevens, and thank Gary for the driving the presentation today. Him and his colleagues may be able to answer those queries as quick as we can. But there's a question that came up. Why does ACC not have approved medical providers for initial assessment for work-related injury, specifically back or shoulder? Other medical insurance companies have that in place. Look, yeah, good question. I'm not quite sure who it came from. We do have medical providers that do assessments for us within our claims world. So if we have conflicting information from the GP, from the treating GP, and maybe from another GP or medical case review, we do have assessments. But no, there's no requirement as such to have an initial assessment straight away. We do trust the judgment of our practitioners, our GPs and our specialists. But if there's any concerns, yeah, we can. And ACC, we do have clinicians that sit in the background that give advice. And if need be, we can refer off for second opinions through medical case reviews. Now, we don't always default to that for obvious reasons, but there is at times we can, and we do use independent assessments to determine work capacity and to determine whether the diagnosis is correct. But no, we don't default to that every single time. I guess the other thing is to point out that anyone has a right to see any provider, whether it's a GP or specialist. No, ACC can't force people in the first instance. They have a right to see a GP. But there is times where we do need to refer off for medical case reviews, where there is a requirement then for ACC maybe to push that point a little bit more. But in the first instance, a person has a right to see any practitioner, and we have to take that on the face value, and we have to assess the information on that to make our decisions. If there's no other questions, I think I'll hand back to Shirley. I think you're going to wrap up the presentation from ShopCare.
Thank you, Pete. That was a lot more about ACC than I ever understood before. If you can get Gary to stop sharing his screen, then we can pop into a poll, just a very quick poll. Where's it gone? Here we go. Okay, that doesn't want to come up. So, okay, let's move on. Thanks everyone for joining us today. It was certainly a lot to absorb. So if you've got more queries, please contact your solutions partner, as Pete said, or if you're unsure who that is, you can go to the general inquiry bcs@acc.co.nz. We will make the recording available. We will be popping it on the events page on the ShopCare website, which is shopcare.org.nz, along with the additional collateral that Pete spoke to you about as well. But if you do have any questions on any of that, please feel free to contact me. I'm Shirley at shopcare.org.nz. Happy to follow up or share anything specific directly with you. So Pete and Gary are going to share with us a number of bits of information, which we'll also put on the website along with the recording for anybody that wants to watch it again or wants to share it with another member of their teams. Thanks, Pete. Thanks, Gary. Great work on our first combined effort with ACC. I will be sending out a survey shortly with a few questions on it. Very quick survey, won't take you more than 2 or 3 minutes, but we'd be really appreciative if you could complete that. It will help us determine what more ACC can help everybody with in terms of looking after their teams. So thank you again, everybody. I think it was certainly very informative.
Thanks, Shirley. Thanks all.
Thanks, everyone.